Last season, we did some minor rust repair. Put in our wheel tubs for our fatter tires, installed some mounts for the 4-link suspension, picked out the rear end we're going to be using, we cut the trunk out, and we built the fuel cell can and mounting frame. In this episode, we build the trunk enclosures that go around the fuel cell. This is an important step before we can fab up the roll cage, because I have to mount these doubler plates to the trunk pan for the rear down tubes to mount to. We'll also do a real project and a real gear segment. I'm making these enclosures out of 20 gauge steel, and I'm putting a wider bead roll into the metal instead of simply leaving the sheet metal flat. Now that's going to stiffen them up quite a bit, and I think it looks better. Now you could make a paper template for these openings, but it's a simple shape and I just transferred my measurements right to the piece. For this type of bead design, don't run a single deep dye pass. I ran a few samples and found that running the piece through 3 times, increasing the depth each time, will decrease the warpage of the part. Also, I don't have a single wide die to make this type of a bead. So I'm using a step die, and then I'm turning the part and running the sequence through twice. There. Nicely done. Minor warpage, if that. I got this top piece just about finished, and I'm putting a bend in the sides that will be welded against the fuel cell frame from the bottom, and then overlapping the remaining sides on the trunk pan, kind of like it's done at the factory. I think that's going to give me the cleanest looking seams. While I finish making these 2 side panels, check out this real project that accessorizes the folding arc station or your weld bench. My project for today is going to save me a lot of frustration. So I love my portable folding arc station. I use it all the time. It's ridiculous. But when I'm doing a weld job, it starts to look like this. I've got my welding parts on here. When I'm not welding, I actually have my helmet. I got to put it somewhere. I've got my TIG torch sitting on the table, my TIG filler, whatever tools I'm going to be using for the job. And as I'm moving the parts around when I'm welding, I start knocking stuff off the table. So my goal for today is build myself a holder that's going to hold the TIG filler. It's going to hold my welding helmet when I'm not using it. It's going to hold the TIG torch. It's going to get that stuff off the table so I have more space. So this is what I envision. I plan on using this 1x1 by 1/8 inch thick aluminum square tubing. This is what will hold the filler metal. I've designed a clamping system that will hold it to the side of the table. And there'll be brackets welded to this square tubing to hold the welding helmet at the front side of the table and hold my TIG torch at the rear of the table. That should clear up enough space on my table to help me get my jobs done. Some of the other materials you're going to need, besides the 1 inch by 1 inch by 1/8 inch aluminum square tube, will be a piece of 1.5 inch by 1/8 inch flat stock. I cut a piece at 6 inches and a piece at 4 inches. You'll also need a piece of 1.5 inch by 1/4 inch, and we'll be cutting 2 1-inch pieces off of that. And you're gonna need 2 5/16 by 18 by 1 inch bolts. Take the 6-inch piece you cut and round the corners off using a belt sander or grinder. Then take a hammer and bend about a 1/2 inch lip on your 6-inch piece. This will be just so that the helmet doesn't slide off. Doesn't have to be a big lip, just something to keep the helmet from sliding off. Now make a line 1 inch from the flat side of your 6-inch piece. This is going to be your lineup marks for welding it on the square tube. Use a 3/4 inch hole saw or rotor broach and drill a hole in the center of your 4-inch piece 1/8 inch from the end. Now mark a line from the edge of the hole to the front edge of your piece. You're going to cut this out with your bandsaw. This is where the TIG torch is going to be held. I'm using a bandsaw for this, but you could easily cut this with a reciprocating saw, or a jigsaw, or even a hacksaw for that matter. Now I just take a deburring tool or a sanding disc and just deburr these sharper edges. You don't want these to cut into the rubber on the TIG torch. Now I'm going to take my 1/4 inch by 1.5 inch wide flat stock and cut 2 1-inch pieces off of that. Remember to deburr all your sharp or rough edges. Now we're going to mark the center of our 1.5 inch side, which is basically going to be 3/4 inch from each side. And make a mark 3/8 inch from the end. This is going to be where we're going to drill a hole. We're going to tap that hole with a 5/16 by 18 tap. The correct drill bit for a 5/16 tap is the letter F, which is 0.257. You could use a G, which is I think about 0.260, but I try to stay away from the 17/64 drill bit because that's getting up to about 0.265, which I think your thread depth is going to be a little bit sloppy at that point. Here's a neat little trick for you if you're having problems tapping your hole straight. I take and put my tap right into my drill press right after I drill the hole. That way I know the tap is going to be perfectly lined up with the hole. But I don't turn on the drill press. It's way too fast to tap that hole. In fact, I unplug it just to make sure that it doesn't accidentally turn on. What I'll do then is I'll use a 5/16 bolt that I cut the threads off of, and it fits perfectly in the chuck hole. And I'll just turn that manually and tap the hole. Just put a little bit of downward pressure on it. Actually, once it starts tapping, it'll pull itself down. Just turn it back by hand. And once it comes out, clean it off a little bit. You've got a perfectly straight tapped hole. I'm going to chamfer the edges of these two legs where the TIG torch slides on, just to make sure it's smooth going in and out. I'm gonna bend a little lip on the edge of these two legs here too, just like I did for the helmet. Okay, I've already made my marks where I'm going to weld my hanger brackets to on my square tubing. I made those dimensions based on two things really. One, how far do I want to reach around the table to grab my welding helmet off the hanger? And two, making sure that there's no obstructions underneath the table. We're going to weld on those pieces of 1/4 inch that you drilled and tapped earlier. And we're going to be welding that on the side of the tube, and that's going to be part of the clamping mechanism that holds it to the table. Okay, so we want to make sure that there's nothing that will obstruct these pieces. Also, make sure that you use your stainless brush and wire brush the oxide layer where you're going to be doing your welding. And then just take some acetone and wipe those areas clean. Okay, we're going to be welding on those 1/4 inch pieces first. And they're going to get welded to that square tube right underneath the hanger bracket. So I'm going to make my measurement a 1/2 inch, and I'm going to make a scribe mark at a 1/2 inch because my other table that I have is got a much thicker tabletop. So I want to make sure that I can use this bracket for both my folding arc station and my other welding table. Okay, I'm going to start by tacking the 1/4 inch pieces on the tube first. I'll be using the Multimatic 220 AC/DC, and I'm using it in the auto set mode set for 1/4 inch. And remember, read and follow all labels and your owner's manual. I'm just going to tack the outside corners first. Then I'm going to come back and weld the longer sides. Now I'm going to be welding the long side of the 1/4 inch piece. Because the tube is 1/8 inch and the piece I'm welding to is 1/4 inch, I'm going to be starting the arc on the 1/4 inch and getting the puddle established on it first, and then walking it down to the 1/8 inch piece. Now I'm only welding this piece on one side. I don't want to weld it on the other side because when I move this over to the other table, which is thicker, I don't want the weld to interfere with this piece fitting up tight against the table. Now the hanger bracket is made of 1/8 inch material, and so is the square tubing. So I've turned my auto set down on my Multimatic to the 1/8 inch setting, but I did turn up the amperage slightly in that fine-tune range. There we go. Now, all I'm gonna do is screw my 5/16 bolts into here and we'll mount it to the table. Much better. Now that I have all my panels pre-fit nice and tight, I can take them back out. I need to drill or punch holes around the outside bends and on the overlapping side so that I can plug weld them back into place. My panels with their precision punched holes are back in place. Now when welding that 1-inch bend from the underside to the fuel cell frame, I'm setting the Multimatic 220 AC/DC to the 16 gauge setting, and then fine tuning it from there. Because even though the panels are made of 20 gauge, the fuel cell frame is 083, so I'm just splitting the difference in power. Then when I get back to welding the top overlap seam, I'll reset the machine to 20 gauge. Well, now that I got these trunk enclosure panels permanently in place, I can spend the next couple hours metal finishing the weld smooth. In the meantime, why don't you check out this quick Real Gear segment on an upgrade that I did to my machine that makes it way more versatile when TIG welding, which will definitely help me welding in the roll cage. In today's segment of Real Gear, we are going to be giving our Multimatic 220 AC/DC an upgrade. The Multimatic comes with the A150 TIG torch, which is basically a number 17 size head. It works great, but for some applications, I would like to have a little smaller one. So we are going to install a modular TIG torch kit from Miller. It's the AK150 MFC. And it gives you 28 different torch configurations of different sizes, and it's super easy to install. What makes this kit modular is that it has a number of different size heads that you can put on your TIG torch. There's even a flex adapter to give you more versatility. It only takes 2 7/16 wrenches to install this kit. First, take your torch and pull the handle back. Take your 2 7/16 wrenches, and remove the existing torch head. And also remove the handle. Install the handle that comes in the kit and the torch body adapter. You're going to tighten the handle back on the torch body adapter. And now you can install the interchangeable head adapter, either the solid one or the flex head. I'm going to use the solid one for now. It just screws onto the torch body adapter, locks into place. Once you attach the interchangeable head adapter to your torch, now you can select one of the torch heads that best fits your application. One of my favorites is the 70-degree number 9 size head. It's much lighter and less bulky than the original A150 head. So you can see the difference between these two heads. It's much easier to get into some of those tighter areas as well. Another head that you'll like is the straight head. I use this head when I'm trying to get into tighter areas as well, especially when I can't get at it from the front. If I need to get my filler metal in from behind the torch, sometimes this is a much better application. I can go straight into that area and then come from the backside with the filler metal. Now, if you need to get into much tighter areas where the back cap of the TIG torch is restricting your access to the weld point, there's some heads that are flush mounted. This will give you easier access to those tighter areas. With the flex adapter on, you can tackle just about any welding position. Once you start using your modular torch kit, you might find that you're going to have an application where you want to switch heads multiple times. I actually use a number of the 70-degree heads, and I have them set up for different configurations. I'll have one set up with a gas lens, one set up without a gas lens. I have them set up for even different sized tungstens because it's easier to change just the head than it is to change your collet body, and tungsten. So you can purchase these separately. For more information on the modular TIG torch kit, go to millerwelds.com. In the search bar, type in AK-150 MFC or stop by your local welding distributor. There we go. Plenty good enough for a trunk. And by the way, when all the fab work is done in the trunk area, and for the whole car actually, all the seams will get seam sealed before final paint. Join us next time on Real Garage when we talk about high strength steel tubing and we start the roll cage.